The crystal chandelier felt like it was mocking her. Sophia Valenti stood invisible at her own husband's party, while her mother-in-law, Beatrice, raised a toast to the other woman. In front of 200 high society guests, her husband Marcus did nothing, his smile fixed, as his mistress, Chloe, blushed. Sophia was just the poor waitress who'd gotten lucky, and they were all about to remind her. But what they didn't know was that a lawyer was walking up the marble steps, carrying a secret that wouldn't just change the party, it would destroy their world and build hers. The Valenti estate wasn't a home. It was a fortress of old money and cold marble. Tonight, it was the stage for Beatrice Valenti's annual Hope Gala, a self-congratulatory affair where the city's elite paid thousands to drink champagne and applaud themselves. For Sophia, it was just another night of being the family's most elegant and most ignored servant. She adjusted a centerpiece, her simple navy blue silk dress a stark contrast to the sequined, peacocking gowns of the guests. She wasn't in the party. She was managing it. It was the role she'd been cast in for the 5 years of her marriage, the quiet, competent, background-dwelling wife. Sophia, darling, Beatrice's voice, sharp as cut glass, sliced through the orchestral music. The catering staff is looking a trifle flustered. Do try to manage them. We can't have the Hendersons thinking we've lost our touch. Beatrice Valenti was a column of ice and diamonds, a woman who believed her bloodline gave her a divine right to be cruel. She had never, not once, approved of her son's marriage. Of course, Beatrice. I'll check on them now, Sophia replied, her voice smooth and practiced. She had long ago learned that showing any emotion was like bleeding in shark-infested waters. As she turned, she nearly bumped into her husband, Marcus Valenti, handsome, hollow, and perpetually glued to his phone. He gave her a perfunctory kiss on the cheek that landed half in her hair. "Everything running smoothly, Soph?" he asked, not looking up from his screen. "It is. Are you all right, Marcus? You've been on edge all week." "Just business, darling. Big deals," he murmured, his thumb swiping furiously. "You know how it is. Now, if you'll excuse me, I see Robert Blackwell just arrived. I need to talk to him about the new marina project." He was gone before she could reply, melting into the crowd, his eyes already scanning for someone else. Not Robert Blackwell, Sophia noted with a familiar, cold knot in her stomach. His eyes had locked onto a flash of crimson red by the entrance. Chloe. Her full name was Chloe Preston, and she was the daughter of Beatrice's oldest friend. She was everything Sophia was not: loud, blonde, unapologetically wealthy, and for the past 6 months, her husband's mistress. Sophia knew. Of course she knew. She knew from the late-night business calls, the scent of a perfume that wasn't hers on his shirts, the way he flinched from her touch, and she knew from the way Beatrice looked at Chloe, like a prized filly, the perfect addition to the Valenti bloodline. Beatrice glided over to Chloe, enveloping her in a warm hug that was a stark, painful contrast to the cold shoulder she always gave Sophia. "Chloe, my dear, you look absolutely radiant. That dress is divine." "Oh, Beatrice, you flatter me. I just had to come and support you and—" "Marcus!" Her eyes flicked across the room, finding Sophia. A small, triumphant smile played on her lips before she turned back to Beatrice. Sophia felt the familiar sting of humiliation. She was a ghost in her own life, haunting the hallways of a marriage that had died long ago. She turned away, focusing on the only thing she could control: the catering. As she pushed through the kitchen doors, she steadied her breathing. It was almost over. She had a plan. She just needed to survive one more night. But this night wasn't like the others. This night, a clock was ticking that only she could hear, and a storm was gathering far beyond the manicured lawns of the Valenti estate. An hour later, the Hope Gala was in full swing. The champagne flowed freely, the laughter was brittle and loud, and the air was thick with perfume and pretense. Sophia had just finished handling a minor crisis with the valets when the tinkling of a glass against a microphone silenced the room. Beatrice stood on the small elevated stage, bathed in a spotlight. Marcus was beside her, his hand resting a little too comfortably in the small of Chloe's back. "My dear, dear friends," Beatrice began, her voice resonating with false warmth. "Thank you all for coming. Your generosity for the children's wing is, as always, overwhelming." Sophia stood near the back, by the bar, a silent observer. She watched her husband murmur something in Chloe's ear, making her giggle and blush. The sight was a physical blow, stealing her breath. "Every year," Beatrice continued, "I am reminded of what truly matters: family, loyalty, and legacy. And this year, I am especially proud." She looked directly at Marcus. "My son, Marcus, who has worked tirelessly to expand the Valenti name. He has been so patient through so many challenges." The unspoken challenge hung in the air, and every eye in the room knew it was directed at Sophia. It was a public shaming, veiled in the thinnest layer of civility. Sophia's hands clenched at her sides, but Beatrice wasn't finished. She turned, her diamond necklace flashing, and took Chloe's hand. "And I must give a special thanks to a wonderful young woman who has been such a support to our family. A true friend, Chloe Preston." The room applauded politely. Chloe preened, her smile wide. "Chloe's work with the Junior League has been simply inspiring," Beatrice gushed, conveniently forgetting that Sophia herself had chaired the library fundraiser last year. "Some people, you see, just have that natural grace, that innate understanding of our world. We are so lucky to have you in our lives, dear." It was a coronation. In front of 200 people, Beatrice had just publicly replaced her. She had anointed the mistress and officially declared the wife a non-entity. Marcus clapped the loudest, pulling Chloe in for a one-armed hug. "To Chloe," he said into the microphone, his voice slurring just slightly from the champagne. Sophia couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in. She had to get out. She slipped out the French doors onto the vast, empty stone terrace. The cool night air was a shock to her hot skin. She leaned against the balustrade, her heart hammering a painful, broken rhythm. This was it. This was the end. She had been holding on for... what? A shred of dignity? There was none left. A murmur of voices drifted from an open window just a few feet away. "How much longer, Marcus? It's humiliating. She's wandering around like a lost puppy. It's an embarrassment." Chloe's sharp, whining tone. "Soon, I promise." Marcus's voice, low and placating. "Just let me handle the finances. I need to see what's in her private account. She's been squirreling away money from her old job, and I want to make sure we get it all before I serve the papers." A cold, visceral shock, more potent than the night air, seized Sophia. It wasn't just that he was leaving her. It wasn't just the affair. He was planning to rob her. The small nest egg she had saved, the only thing that was hers, he was trying to steal it. "Mother is right," Marcus continued, his voice hardening. "It's time to cut the dead weight. We'll be together, I promise. Now let's go back in. We can't leave Mother alone." The voices faded. Sophia was left alone in the dark, but a new cold fire was kindled in her chest. The hurt was still there, but it was being rapidly consumed by a chilling, clarifying rage. "Dead weight," she whispered to the empty garden. "We'll see about that." Sophia's story, the one the Valentis told, was simple. A pretty waitress from a no-name town who'd gotten impossibly lucky by catching Marcus Valenti's eye. Beatrice loved to tell people how she'd had to teach Sophia which fork to use. It was a neat, condescending narrative that made Sophia's presence in their world a permanent act of charity. The truth was, as always, more complex. Sophia had been a waitress, working her way through a literature degree. But the most important person in her life wasn't a man. It was her great-aunt. Dr. Matilda Croft was the family's crazy one. A brilliant, eccentric physicist who had been a pioneer in quantum computing, she had cashed out her groundbreaking patents for an undisclosed sum decades ago and vanished into a secluded, sprawling estate in upstate New York. The rest of the family kept their distance, put off by her sharp tongue and her utter disdain for social niceties. But Sophia had always adored her. As her mind reeled from Marcus's betrayal on the terrace, it flashed back not to her wedding day, but to a rainy afternoon in Matilda's library 2 months ago. "Chess, my dear," Matilda had said, her sharp blue eyes fixed on the board. She was frail, bundled in a wool blanket, but her mind was as lethal as a steel trap. "It's not about the pieces. It's about the board. People see the queen, the knight, the bishop. They forget that the power is in controlling the squares they move to." Sophia had been the only one who visited. While her parents sent polite, distant Christmas cards, Sophia drove up twice a month. She brought groceries, yes, but mostly she brought company. They talked about stars, about poetry, about the nature of time. Matilda had been the one who'd encouraged her to leave her small town to get her degree. And when Matilda got sick, Sophia had been the one to manage her care, sitting by her bedside, reading Dostoevsky aloud as the old woman faded. "You are too good for that. That shiny boy," Matilda had rasped just days before she passed. "His teeth are bright, but his spine is made of jelly." "I know, Auntie," Sophia had whispered, smoothing her hair. I'm working on a plan." "Good." Matilda had gripped her hand, her knuckles like polished stones. "Never let them make you small, Sophia. You are a Croft. We are not small." Matilda had passed away 6 weeks ago. Sophia was still drowning in the quiet, profound grief of losing the one person who had ever truly seen her. She had handled the simple, private funeral alone. Marcus hadn't even bothered to come. "I'm swamped with the gala, Soph. You know that," he'd said, annoyed she'd even asked. "Can't you just handle your side of the family? I'll send flowers." He never did. In the intervening weeks, Sophia had been quietly communicating with Matilda's lawyer, a man she'd never met, a Mr. Harrison from a prestigious, old-world firm. There were papers to sign, documents to review. She had been distracted and on edge, as Marcus had noted, not from guilt, but from grief and the overwhelming burden of executing her aunt's will. She had told Marcus nothing. Not about the depth of her relationship with Matilda, and certainly not about the contents of the will, which she'd been too busy to have read in detail. Standing on that cold terrace, the echo of her husband's treachery in her ears, Sophia finally understood her aunt's last lesson. Marcus and Beatrice saw her as a pawn, a waitress. They were so focused on the piece, they never bothered to look at the board. They had no idea that while they were plotting to steal her small savings, she had just inherited the entire game. She took a deep breath, straightened her dress, and wiped the last trace of victim from her face. The grieving was done. The waitressing was over. It was time to control the board. Sophia walked back into the ballroom. The atmosphere, to her, had changed entirely. The glittering chandeliers now seemed harsh, the laughter grotesque. She saw Marcus and Chloe standing near the champagne fountain, their heads bent together, sharing a private joke. Beatrice was holding court, accepting fawning compliments on the party. They looked like ants to her, tiny, predictable, and utterly unaware of the boot that was about to fall. She moved with a new purpose. She would not make a scene. She would not cry or scream. She would simply go upstairs, pack her bag, call a car, and leave. She would let her lawyer handle the divorce. It was a clean, simple, and devastatingly effective plan. She was halfway to the grand staircase when a commotion at the main entrance stopped her. Beatrice, her voice an octave higher than usual, was hissing at the head of her private security team. "I don't care who he says he is. He's not on the list. This is a private event. Remove him." A tall, unsmiling man in a severe black overcoat stood in the marble entryway. He was rain-damp and held a heavy, old-fashioned leather briefcase. He looked utterly out of place and completely unbothered. "Mrs. Beatrice Valenti." The man's voice was a deep baritone that cut through the music with alarming ease. The orchestra faltered, then stopped. The ballroom fell silent. "I am Mrs. Valenti, and you are trespassing," Beatrice snapped. The man calmly passed the sputtering security guard, who seemed physically incapable of stopping him. He walked to the center of the foyer, his gaze sweeping the room. "I am Robert Harrison, of the firm Harrison, Croft and Lloyd. I am here on urgent business for a client." Marcus, annoyed at the interruption, strode over. "See here, Harrison, this is a private party. Whatever business you have can wait until Monday. Now get out before I have you arrested." Mr. Harrison fixed Marcus with a look of profound disinterest. "My business cannot wait. I am the executor of the estate of Dr. Matilda Croft. My presence here, I assure you, is non-negotiable." At the name Matilda Croft, Beatrice's brow furrowed in confusion. "Croft? Is that Sophia's side?" Marcus scoffed. "Her crazy old aunt, the one who died? What about it? Did she leave us her collection of dusty books?" Mr. Harrison's eyes scanned the room again, ignoring Marcus. "I was told I would find Mrs. Sophia Valenti here." Every head in the room, 200 of them, swiveled in unison. They found Sophia, standing frozen at the foot of the staircase, a spotlight of collective curiosity pinning her in place. She felt a strange, cold calm settle over her. She recognized the name, of course, Robert Harrison, the man she had been emailing with. She took a step forward. "I'm Sophia Valenti." Mr. Harrison nodded, his expression softening, almost imperceptibly. "Mrs. Valenti, a pleasure to finally meet you in person. I have made several attempts to contact you today to finalize this matter. However, your husband," he gave Marcus a sharp, pointed look, "informed my secretary that you were indisposed and not to be disturbed with trivial family matters." Sophia's blood ran cold. Marcus had intercepted the lawyer's calls. He had actively blocked this. "I apologize, Mr. Harrison," Sophia said, her voice clear and steady. "I have been busy, but I am available now." "Excellent," the lawyer replied. "Given the attempts to obstruct the execution of my client's final wishes, I was instructed to deliver the final disposition in person, at the earliest possible opportunity, regardless of the setting." Beatrice stepped forward, her face a mask of indignation. "A disposition of what? What could be so important that you would ruin my gala?" Mr. Harrison looked from Beatrice to Marcus, and then to the 200 rapt faces of the city's elite. He seemed to make a decision. "Very well," he said, clicking open the brass latches on his briefcase. "If a public audience is what you prefer, a public audience you shall have." The silence in the ballroom was absolute. The only sound was the sharp click of the latches on Mr. Harrison's briefcase. He pulled out a thick, cream-colored document, bound in a blue ribbon. As I stated, Mr. Harrison began, his voice projecting to every corner of the room. I am the executor of the last will and testament of Dr. Matilda Helen Croft. Get on with it, Marcus snapped. How much did the old bat leave? A few thousand? A painting? We're busy. Mr. Harrison slowly put on a pair of silver-rimmed reading glasses. He looked at Marcus over the top of them. Mr. Valenti, I would advise you to remain silent. You are deeply out of your depth. He then turned to the document. Dr. Croft, as some of you may not know, was not merely a reclusive aunt. She was the anonymous sole founder and owner of a research company known as Quantum Leap Solutions. A murmur went through the crowd. Robert Blackwell, the man Marcus had pretended to want to see, choked on his champagne. Quantum Leap? That's impossible. That company was sold to a private equity firm 3 months ago for a rumored $1.7 billion. The rumors were incorrect, Mr. Harrison said coolly. The final sale price was $1.9 billion. A collective, audible gasp filled the room. Marcus's face went white. Beatrice clutched the podium for support. Chloe's smug smile had frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief. $1.9 billion? Marcus stammered, his voice a dry croak. She had that. That, Mr. Harrison continued, was merely the proceeds from the sale of her primary asset. It does not account for her extensive portfolio of real estate, her private art collection, or her controlling interest in several other technology patents. He paused, letting the weight of the numbers settle on the room. Dr. Croft was a woman of singular focus, and, it seems, singular affection. Her will is quite specific. He looked directly at Sophia, his eyes kind. She bequeaths her collection of first-edition poetry to the New York Public Library. She bequeaths a sum of $5 million to the university where she earned her doctorate. Beatrice let out a shaky breath, a look of greedy calculation already forming, if the side bequests were that large. And now, Mr. Harrison said, we come to the residue of the estate. He looked up from the paper, first at Marcus, then at Beatrice, then at Chloe, as if committing their faces to memory. To my beloved grandniece, Sophia Croft Valenti, the only member of my family who was not a greedy, hollow, and utterly disappointing shell of a human being. Beatrice made a small, offended noise. I leave the entirety of my remaining estate. All properties, all accounts, all holdings and all assets, tangible and intangible. The total current value of the estate, Mrs. Valenti, is approximately $2.3 billion. For a full 10 seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of the kitchen freezers. $2.3 billion. Sophia's knees felt weak, but she locked them. She thought of Matilda's hand in hers. We are not small. Then the silence broke. Chaos. Chloe Preston, the mistress in red, was the first to react. Her face, which had gone from smug to shocked to pale, crumpled. She made a sound like a deflating balloon and promptly fainted, or at least performed a very convincing imitation of it. No one moved to help her. Beatrice Valenti stumbled, her hand flying to her throat, clutching at her pearls as if they were a life raft. $2 billion, she whispered, the words catching in her throat. She looked at Sophia, her eyes wide with a horror that was rapidly being replaced by a sickening, desperate calculation. But it was Marcus who moved first. His transformation was a grotesque marvel. The annoyance, the arrogance, the cold disdain. It all melted away in an instant, replaced by a look of such fawning, sycophantic warmth it made Sophia's stomach turn. "Sophia!" he cried, his voice suddenly full of a love she hadn't heard in years. "Sophia, darling!" He rushed to her, stumbling over Chloe's prone form. He grabbed Sophia's hands, his own suddenly sweaty. "My God, why didn't you say anything? 2 billion! We're rich! You did this, you clever, clever girl! I always knew you were special." He lunged forward to kiss her, his face a mask of desperate greed. And Sophia moved. It wasn't a shove. It was a firm, immovable block. She put her hand flat on his chest and pushed. "Don't touch me." Her voice wasn't the quiet whisper of the background wife. It was cold, it was clear, and it resonated with an authority that stunned the entire room. Most of all Marcus. He blinked, his smile faltering. "Soph? What's wrong? It's us! We won! This is the best day of our lives!" Sophia laughed. It was a short, sharp, bitter sound that held no humor. "Our lives," she repeated. "No, Marcus. This is the best day of my life. It's the end of yours." "What are you talking about?" he stammered, a frantic edge entering his voice. That was just... We were just talking. On the terrace. That was nothing." "Oh, you heard that?" Sophia said, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "You heard the part where you called me dead weight? Or the part where you were handling the finances so you could steal my savings before you served the divorce papers?" Marcus's face went from pale to a sickly green. The guests gasped. This was no longer a party, it was an execution. "Sophia, no, you misunderstood," he pleaded, his eyes darting to the shocked faces of the Hendersons and the Blackwells. I was planning a surprise for you. I was planning to pay off your old student loans. Yes, a surprise. A surprise divorce to run off with her?" Sophia pointed to Chloe, who was beginning to stir on the floor. "Get up, Chloe, you don't want to miss this." She turned from her husband's pathetic, crumbling face and addressed Mr. Harrison. "Mr. Harrison, thank you for coming. Your timing is, as my aunt would have appreciated, impeccable. Mrs. Valenti, it is my honor," the lawyer replied, a small, satisfied smile touching his lips. "Dr. Croft spoke of you often. She said, and I quote, 'Sophia is the only one with a steel spine. She just needs a reason to use it.' It appears she has one." "She does," Sophia agreed. She then looked at Beatrice, who was now trembling, not with rage, but with genuine fear. You can't," Beatrice stammered. "He's your husband. The money, it's Valenti money now, isn't it?" Sophia let the question hang in the air. She took a step closer to her mother-in-law. "You asked me once which fork to use, Beatrice," Sophia said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Do you know what I learned? It doesn't matter which fork you use, if you own the table." And then she delivered the final, devastating blow. "Mr. Harrison," she said, turning back to the lawyer. "There was one other item in the portfolio, wasn't there? The real estate holdings?" "Indeed, Mrs. Valenti. Several. Including," Sophia said, "a rather significant one here in the city. A certain mortgage note. For a certain estate that was in default until my aunt quietly purchased the debt from the bank 2 years ago." Beatrice's eyes widened in dawning, abject terror. "No." "Yes," Sophia said. "The Valenti estate. This house. This ballroom. The very marble you're standing on." She looked at her, soon-to-be ex-husband and mother-in-law, as of 5:00 p.m. yesterday, upon the final execution of the will, the title for this property transferred to me. The final word, mine, echoed in the cavernous ballroom, landing with the force of a physical blow. It seemed to suck all the sound from the room, creating a vacuum where 200 of the city's most powerful people were frozen in a state of collective, breathless shock. The orchestra had long since fallen silent. The only sound was the distant clink of an ice cube settling in a glass, a sound as loud as a gunshot in the oppressive silence. Beatrice Valenti's hand, laden with heirloom rings, was pressed to her chest. The blood had drained from her face, leaving a garish mask of expensive foundation and bright red lipstick. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, were fixed on Sophia, seeing her, truly seeing her, for the very first time, not as a mild inconvenience, but as an executioner. Marcus was a statue of disbelief. His mouth was open in a silent "oh," his earlier, frantic calculations about the inheritance now seeming like a child's arithmetic in the face of this incomprehensible new reality. This house? This house? The very bedrock of his identity, the symbol of his legacy, the fortress of the Valenti name, was no longer his. Chloe Preston, forgotten on the floor, had scrambled to her feet. Her crimson dress was rumpled, her carefully styled hair was a mess, and the triumphant blush from Beatrice's praise was long gone, replaced by a pasty, desperate pallor. She, more than anyone, understood the brutal math of high society. She had tethered herself to a sinking ship. And Sophia simply stood there, her spine a rod of steel, her hands steady. The quiet background wife was gone, evaporated. In her place stood a woman who had just inherited the earth beneath her enemy's feet. It was Marcus who broke the silence, his voice a strangled, desperate rasp. "No," he said it again, louder, trying to force reality to bend to his will. "No, you're lying. This is a joke, a cruel, sick joke." He lunged forward, not at Sophia, but at Mr. Harrison, his fingers grabbing for the will in the lawyer's hand. "This is fake. This is a conspiracy. You two, you planned this." Mr. Harrison, without so much as flinching, pulled the document back and held up a hand. "Mr. Valenti, if you assault me, I will have you arrested. These documents are filed with the state of New York. The chain of title for this property, LOC 39B881, was legally transferred to my client, Dr. Matilda Croft, 24 months ago, upon the purchase of your consolidated, defaulted debt. As per her will's execution yesterday at 5:00 p.m., title and all associated assets were legally conveyed to Mrs. Sophia Valenti. It is, as they say, a done deal." The legal jargon, cold and irrefutable, was like a douse of ice water. Marcus turned, his eyes wild, his mask of the charming playboy shattering. He stumbled towards Sophia, his hands outstretched, not in anger, but in a grotesque, fawning plea. "Sophia, darling," his voice cracked, the endearment sounding alien. "Baby, please stop this. This isn't you. You're upset. You're grieving. You heard what I said on the terrace and you're lashing out. I deserved it. I did. But this isn't the woman I married." Sophia's internal monologue was cold and clear. "No, it's not. The woman you married is dead. You and your mother killed her. This is the woman who just climbed out of the grave." "The woman you married," Sophia said, her voice clear and cutting, "was a fool who believed your vows. The woman you married was the dead weight you were planning to cut loose. The woman you married was the one whose small savings account you were planning to handle before you served her the divorce papers." A fresh wave of gasps rippled through the crowd. This was no longer just an inheritance. It was the public airing of a betrayal so complete it was breathtaking. "No!" Marcus shrieked, his desperation mounting. "You misunderstood. I was I was talking to my mother. You know how she is. I was just placating her. I was planning a surprise. Yes, a surprise. I was going to use that money to buy you a car, a new one, a Tesla. The lie was so pathetic, so transparently thin, that a man in the front row, Robert Blackwell, the very man Marcus had been trying to impress, actually let out a snort of derision. "A Tesla, Marcus?" Sophia replied, her voice laced with a pity that was more insulting than any rage. "My aunt left me $2.3 billion. I think I can buy my own car." She took a step back from him, as if he were something contagious. "You don't get to touch me. You don't get to call me darling. You don't get to speak to me ever again unless it's through a lawyer." The finality of it finally broke through his denial. His face, which had been pale, flushed a dark, mottled purple. The panic gave way to a primal, cornered rage. You bitch!" he roared, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "You planned this. You gold-digging waitress. You knew all along. You tricked that old woman, you seduced her, and you waited to humiliate me." Before he could take another step, Mr. Harrison spoke, his voice a gavel blow. "Mr. Valenti, I will remind you only once. You are accusing the sole beneficiary of Dr. Croft's will of undue influence. Dr. Croft was certified as of sound mind and body by a panel of 3 independent physicians up until her death. Her will has already passed probate. If you pursue this slanderous and frankly a ridiculous accusation, my firm will countersue you for defamation so fast your head will spin. You are, as I believe I mentioned, deeply out of your depth. You have nothing. You are nothing." The lawyer's words seemed to deflate Marcus. All the fight went out of him, replaced by a hollow, terrifying emptiness. He stared at Sophia, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He was, for the first time, truly finished. But Beatrice was not. The matriarch of the Valenti name, who had been frozen in horror, now found her voice. It was not the honeyed, condescending tone she used for her friends. It was a shriek, high and thin as a razor. "She can't! You ingrate!" she screamed, pointing a trembling, diamond-clad finger at Sophia. "We took you in! I took you in! I taught you how to dress, how to speak, which fork to use. I made you presentable. And this is how you repay me? By conspiring with a senile old woman to steal my home?" "Your home," Sophia repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "You seem to be under the same delusion as your son, Beatrice. This house was never yours. It was your husband's. And he, like your son, was a man who lived far beyond his means. He leveraged this legacy to the hilt. My aunt, the senile old woman, was just smart enough to buy the debt when the bank got tired of your family's excuses." Sophia stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Beatrice could hear, though the entire room strained to listen. "You taught me which fork to use, Beatrice. Yes, you taught me that. You also taught me that family is just a word you use to bludgeon people. You taught me that loyalty is a one-way street, and that love is conditional on bloodlines and bank accounts." Her voice rose again, clear and strong. "You humiliated me for 5 years. You stood on that stage, your stage, not 1 hour ago, and publicly anointed my husband's mistress. You called her a support, and me a challenge. You dismissed me. You made me small. So let me be very clear, using the only language you understand." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "By your own rules, Beatrice, the person with the most money wins. And tonight, I have won. You are a guest in my house. and frankly, your presence is no longer welcome." "No," Beatrice whispered. The fight was gone, replaced by a dawning, abject terror. This wasn't just about money, it was about social extinction. "No, please, Sophia, dear." The word dear was a mangled, desperate sound. You can't. Think of the Valenti name. The legacy. Our position. What will people say?" "They'll say," Sophia said, "that the Valenti name is bankrupt, both financially and morally." It was at this precise moment that the third member of the trio decided to make her move. Chloe Preston, who had been watching this exchange with the frantic eyes of a gambler at a losing table, saw her one tiny, desperate opening. Marcus was a lost cause. Beatrice was a crumbling ruin, but Sophia was a woman. Chloe rushed forward, her face a mask of manufactured tears. She tried to grab Sophia's hand. "Sophia, oh, Sophia, thank God," she sobbed, a truly impressive performance. "Thank God you're free of him. You don't know what he was like." Sophia recoiled, pulling her hand back as if from a snake. "He's a monster," Chloe cried, turning her performance to the assembled guests. "He lied to me. He told me your marriage was a sham, just a piece of paper. He said you were cold, that you didn't love him. He preyed on me. He promised me. Oh, he promised me everything." She turned back to Sophia, her eyes wide with a plea. "You and I, we're the same. We're both his victims. You have to believe me. We women, we have to stick together. Don't let him get away with this. Please, Sophia, don't let him ruin me too." The audacity was breathtaking. It was a masterpiece of treachery, a desperate pivot from mistress to sister-in-arms. The guests were riveted. Sophia stared at Chloe, not with anger, but with a profound, weary contempt. "A victim?" Sophia said, her voice flat. "Were you a victim an hour ago, Chloe, when you were giggling with him by the champagne fountain? Were you a victim when you stood on that stage and accepted my mother-in-law's praise, knowing I was in the room? Were you a victim when you stood on the terrace and laughed when he called me dead weight?" Chloe's tears stopped. Instantly. Her face hardened, the mask of the victim dissolving. The gamble had failed. "You are not my sister," Sophia said, her voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow more terrifying than a shout. "You are not my friend. You are not a victim. You are a co-conspirator. You are the woman who, in my own home, helped my husband and his mother plot my destruction. You just bet on the wrong horse." You think you're so much better than me, don't you?" Chloe hissed, her voice now a venomous spit. "Just because of your money? You're still just that pathetic little waitress who got lucky. You're nothing." "I may have been a waitress," Sophia said, "but I was never a vulture. And I," she added with a small, cold smile, "am no longer lucky. I am in charge." Marcus, who had been standing in a catatonic state, was galvanized by one last desperate thought. The law!" he bellowed, his voice raw. "The law! She's my wife! What's hers is mine! Community property! That's the law! Half! I get half!" He was screaming at the guests now, at Mr. Harrison, at the ceiling, a drowning man grasping for a single imaginary piece of straw. "I get half! You can't take it all! I'll see you in court! I'll... Mr. Harrison sighed, a small, put-upon sound. He stepped forward, adjusting his cuffs. "Mr. Valenti, for the final time. 1. New York is an equitable distribution state, not a community property state. The division of marital assets is what is fair, not what is half. But 2, and this is the most important part. So I will speak very slowly. He paused, ensuring he had the entire room's attention. It does not matter. The entirety of the $2.3 billion estate is an inheritance. An inheritance is considered separate property, not marital property, by the laws of this state. It belongs only to the person who inherits it. He let that sink in. The only way it becomes marital property, he continued, as if teaching a law school seminar, is if the inheritor commingles it. For example, if Mrs. Valenti were to deposit that money into your joint bank account, given that she has been in possession of this inheritance for, he checked his watch, approximately 30 hours, and she has not commingled a single dollar with you, you have precisely, legally, zero claim to it. He then delivered the final, crushing blow. In fact, Mr. Valenti, the only marital property of any note that will be discussed in your divorce proceeding is the small savings account Mrs. Valenti funded with her own earnings. The very account you planned to steal, given your documented, and now very publicly witnessed, conspiracy to commit fraud against your spouse. I suspect the judge will find it equitable to award that to her as well. You will leave this marriage with exactly what you brought into it, which, as I understand, is a significant amount of personal debt and a failing marina project. It was over. There was no appeal, no loophole, no escape. Marcus Valenti, the golden boy, the heir, was utterly, publicly, and legally ruined. Beatrice let out a sound, a low, guttural, animal-like keen of pure despair. It was the sound of a queen watching her castle turn to dust. Sophia looked at the three of them, the husband who had betrayed her, the mother-in-law who had tormented her, the mistress who had tried to replace her. They were no longer giants. They were just pathetic. Small, greedy, and defeated. The rage she had felt was gone. The hurt was gone. All she felt was a profound, cleansing, cold stillness. "You have ruined my party," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "and you have taken up enough of my time." "Sophia, please," Marcus whispered, his voice that of a broken child. I have nowhere to go. Please, don't do this." "That is not my problem," she said. She turned to the head of the Valenti security team, a man named David, who had been her silent ally for years, the one who always gave her a kind nod, the one who had seen Beatrice's cruelty firsthand. He was no longer looking at Beatrice for orders. His eyes were fixed, respectfully, on Sophia. "David," Sophia said. "Ma'am?" His voice was crisp. "Mr. Valenti, Mrs. Valenti Sr. and Miss Preston are trespassing. Please, escort them off my property." My things!" Beatrice shrieked, her panic returning. "My jewels, my clothes, my mink coats, my art," Marcus yelled, suddenly animated. The Monet in the study, the sculptures." "The art?" Sophia asked, cocking an eyebrow at Mr. Harrison. The lawyer checked a line in his file. "The art, the furniture, the silverware, and all household effects were leveraged against the original loan your grandfather took, Mr. Valenti. They are part of the property's assets. They belong to Mrs. Valenti now." Beatrice lunged. It was a slow, telegraphed, clumsy movement, her face contorted in a mask of pure, undiluted hatred, her hands clawed, aiming for Sophia's face. "You wretch!" David and another guard intercepted her before she was within 5 feet. They caught her by the arms, her expensive silks tearing in their grip. "Let go of me!" she screamed. "Do you know who I am?" "A trespasser, ma'am," David said, his voice flat. He and the other guard began to physically drag her toward the grand foyer. "No, I'll have you fired. I'll... Marcus, seeing his mother's humiliation, simply broke. He didn't fight. He didn't speak. He just crumpled. The arrogant, handsome man was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed shell. He allowed the guards to take his arms and lead him away, his expensive shoes scuffing pathetically on the marble he no longer owned. Chloe was last. She tried for dignity, yanking her arm away from the guard. "I can walk!" she snapped. She pulled her torn dress straight, and with as much of a haughty glare as she could muster, she began the long walk of shame, her head high. But the illusion shattered as she stumbled on her heel, her ankle twisting, and she let out an ugly, frustrated sob. The three of them were hauled through the grand foyer. The great carved oak doors were pulled open, revealing the cold, rainy night. "You'll regret this, Sophia," Marcus bellowed, one last desperate cry. "You'll be nothing without me. I'll see you in court," Beatrice shrieked, her voice thin and reedy. I'll destroy you!" And then the doors slammed shut. The heavy thud was a note of absolute finality. They were gone. The ballroom was silent. 200 pairs of eyes turned as one, back to Sophia. She stood alone in the center of the vast room, the new, undisputed center of gravity. She felt a single tear track down her cheek, not of sadness, but of 5 years of compressed pain, humiliation, and fear leaving her body all at once. She angrily wiped it away. Mr. Harrison stepped quietly to her side. "Mrs. Valenti, my apologies for the theatricality. Dr. Croft's instructions were very specific. She was to ensure there was no ambiguity, especially given her low opinion of your husband." He reached into his breast pocket and produced a small, simple, cream-colored envelope. "She also enclosed a personal note for you, to be given only after," and I quote, "The trash has been taken out." Sophia's hands were shaking as she took it. She recognized Matilda's spiky, impatient handwriting, just her name, Sophia. She broke the seal. Inside was a single card. It held only one sentence. "The board is yours. Now play." A true smile, the first in years, touched Sophia's lips. It was a smile of fire and steel. The grief for her aunt was still there, but now it was joined by a fierce, profound gratitude. She turned to the stunned, silent crowd. She straightened her spine. The waitress was gone. The victim was gone. She calmly walked to a passing waiter's tray and picked up a fresh flute of champagne. She moved to the small stage where her mother-in-law had stood just an hour before. "My apologies, everyone," she said, her voice ringing with a new, effortless power. "It seems this gala has a new host, and new rules, and a new name." She looked out at the sea of faces, the Hendersons, the Blackwells, the people who had pitied her, ignored her, and watched her humiliation. "The Hope Gala is officially over." She raised her glass. "I'd like to welcome you all to the first annual Matilda Croft Foundation Gala for New Beginnings. The original donation goal for tonight's charity was $500,000. A respectable sum." She paused, then smiled. "I will be personally matching all donations, dollar for dollar. So let's make the new goal $5 million. A stunned silence, and then Robert Blackwell raised his glass. "To the Matilda Croft Foundation, I'll pledge $500,000 to that." A woman in the back called out, "100,000!" It was a cascade. The money, the power, the influence. It was all turning, in real time, toward her. Sophia let them cheer for a moment, then raised her glass again. "And a final toast," she said, "to my great-aunt, Dr. Matilda Croft. She taught me many things, but the most important lesson was this." She looked around the magnificent, glittering ballroom. Her ballroom. "It doesn't matter which fork you use. if you own the table, the silverware, the house, and the bank that holds the mortgage. She took a long, slow sip. The bar is open. The orchestra will resume. Please enjoy the rest of my party. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but Sophia served hers on $1 billion platter. She didn't just inherit money. She inherited the power to expose the vipers in her own home. From an invisible wife to an untouchable titan, her story is a powerful reminder that the quietest person in the room often holds the most strength. What do you think Marcus and Beatrice did the next day? Do you believe in karma like this? This kind of real-life drama happens every day. If you love stories where the underdog gets their ultimate reward, let us know in the comments. We read everyone. Don't forget to like this video if you were cheering for Sophia, and subscribe to the channel for more unbelievable stories. Hit that share button to send this to someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. We'll see you in the next story.